What types of bad parenting do kids not recover from? When I was 12, I called CPS, but not to protect myself. I had just been adopted by a couple who could never have their own kids, and they seemed so nice at first. They never yelled at me like my bio mom or dad did. They gave me ice cream just for existing, and they tucked me into bed with hot chocolate by my bedside every night. I was convinced any kid would be lucky to have them as parents. That's why, when I found out they had miraculously gotten pregnant, I cheered. However, that's when things changed. It was like a switch, but not in the way they treated me, rather in the way they treated him. My adoptive parents instantly became obsessed with raising Jacob as this perfect and gifted child. They hung this huge chart in the kitchen marking every milestone the day they took him from the hospital. If Jacob didn't sit up, walk, or talk exactly when the internet said he should, they'd get this anxious look and start whispering to each other. By the time Jacob was 9 months old, they were already making him do these daily flashcards. I watched from the hallway as my dad sighed heavily whenever Jacob got distracted or confused. It felt weird and uncomfortable, but I thought maybe they were just stressed out about being new parents. It got worse when Jacob turned 2. They signed him up for these advanced toddler classes, trying to teach him Latin on top of English. At home, they spent hours drilling him on letters and numbers. If Jacob got something wrong, they'd tense up, their faces showing clear disappointment. Sometimes Jacob would cry at night, and instead of comforting him, they'd stand over his crib with their arms folded until he stopped. They said it would build character. I started noticing how anxious Jacob got all the time. He'd pick nervously at his fingers. His eyes always looked like he was waiting for someone to yell at him. One night after a preschool meeting, I heard his teacher mention that Jacob was struggling socially. On the drive home, my parents lectured Jacob nonstop about embarrassing the family. He sat silently in his car seat, tears rolling down his cheeks. From that day, dinner became a nightmare. Jacob was no longer allowed to eat until he perfectly recited whatever they drilled him on that day. Sometimes he'd sit there until late, his stomach growling loud enough for me to hear from upstairs. Then one day, Jacob brought home a preschool report card labeled B+, you're brilliant. And my parents lost it. They stood over him in the living room, shouting about how he wasn't even trying. Jacob just stood frozen, staring at the floor, shaking. That's when I decided I couldn't let this keep happening. I started secretly recording their outbursts on my phone. I felt guilty about it, like I was betraying the only real family I'd ever had, but Jacob needed help. One afternoon after school, I dialed CPS with shaking hands. I gave them details and told them I had proof. The woman on the phone promised they'd look into it immediately. CPS didn't waste time. Just 2 days later, they showed up unannounced. I remember that moment so vividly. Jacob stood at the kitchen table, holding a paper with his shaky handwriting. My parents loomed over him, pointing angrily, their voices filled with frustration. Jacob was pale, looking more terrified than I'd ever seen him. The CPS workers walked right into that chaos. My parents spun around, shocked and embarrassed, trying to explain things away, but CPS had already seen enough. One worker gently pulled Jacob away, noticing his scared eyes and taking him into an empty room in the house for questioning. CPS collected everything I had, videos, notes, even the harsh milestone charts on the kitchen wall. The investigation didn't drag out. They quickly saw the emotional abuse was serious and ongoing. Within weeks, Jacob and I were both removed from their care and placed together in a quiet foster home, where he was able to heal and recover from the trauma he endured. The strangest part of all this is that while my parents were doing this to Jacob, they still treated me like they always did. I still got love, hugs, kisses, and hot chocolate every night. To this day, I still wonder why.